This channel has been a strong advocate, if I'm not too presumptive, I'll use the adjective strong, for Medicare for all. I've gone so far as to say that if a candidate is not pushing or advocating for that particular position, it is a litmus test on my behalf. They will not get my support. Interestingly to note, there's been a small, modest win on this front. I'm going to call this a big win for Bernie Sanders, considering where we were 6, 7, 8 years ago. But a modest win in regards to trying to affect that particular political agenda throughout the United States. A majority of Democrats have signed on to Medicare for all. Not Medicare for all, real Medicare for all. And I don't mean a majority of Democrats who go out to vote. There was already an overwhelming majority for it from their standpoint. I'm talking about the Democrats in Congress. 118 Democrats have signed on to Jamarl's Medicare for all bill. Again, not Medicare for all, but actually Medicare for all. Welcome to the Soapbox. My name is Jamarl Thomas. This is the Progressive Soapbox. Guys, if you enjoy this content, you find yourself coming back to this channel often, please like, share, and you can always support through PayPal, Patreon. I like to say even $1 helps. And look, if it's not me, whatever content creator that you find yourself going back to often, please consider supporting them, even with $1. YouTube is treacherous territory. I was looking at Kyle's page, and I'll get to this video in a moment. Kyle from Secular Talk. Secular Talk has, nearly 1 million subscribers or some ungodly number. I think it's like 500,000 subscribers. And, when they drop a video, those videos get like hundreds of thousands of views. Or let's say 30,000, let's say 50,000 views. Let's say on a bad day. When they demonetize that video, you're talking about hundreds of dollars that Kyle's not getting. What's his name? Pacman, same thing. My other channel, World War II. All of this, YouTube has become treacherous territory for people who are not CNN and Fox News. And the irony of it is, the whole point of a YouTube was because people didn't want to deal with corporate media. Wherever you go is where you are, I suppose. Let's do the news. This is Jamarl Thomas. Jamarl Thomas introduced Medicare for All Act of 2019. She's lamented on people using the term Medicare for All, looking at you, Kamala Harris, when it is not, in fact, Medicare for all. Or using terms that are around Medicare for America, Medicare for some, Medicare for a few, that try to imply that it isn't anywhere near akin to Medicare for all. You want to know what Medicare for all is? This is Medicare for all. HR 1384, Medicare for All Act of 2019. If that's not what you're talking about, you ain't talking about nothing. And this is in the House of Representatives. Bernie Sanders has put his Medicare for All Act, of course, in Congress, in the House of, in the Senate. Now, in a perfect world, under an election of Sanders, Jamarl's bill would have to be merged with Sanders' bill, in which case this will be a back and forth and trying to determine what it's actually going to look like. Ultimately, what we're talking about now is a vision for what we want to do, a decision of this is what we want to do, this is our goal, this is what we set to achieve. And then you go through the hard work in the process of making that work. But what you don't do is start at the 50-yard line and give it all away in the beginning. That's what you don't do. Medicare for some, Medicare for a few, Medicare for people with bad legs, whatever you want to call it, that's not Medicare for all. This is. Don't misunderstand me. I call this a modest win from the standpoint of trying to get this particular policy accomplished. And the reason I call it a modest win, because just because people sign on for it now, when there is no ability to affect it, well, that's nice, but that's not really, when you sign on to it, when it can be affected, that's when it matters. But to some degree, this is a win. And I consider this a huge win for Sanders. Think back 6 years ago. 6 years ago. Think back longer than that, when Obama was running. Obama comes in office and then barely can get out of his mouth a public option. And what happens? The moment that he gets into office, they tuck that public option under the bed and act as if it never happened. So, color me cynical when I say, yeah, modest, it's nice that they're willing to sign on for it when Donald Trump is in the White House and when you have Republicans in the Senate. But here's the catch. At one point, they wouldn't even do that. At one point, you couldn't even get them to put their name on it. At one point, you couldn't even get them to come out of their mouth. You couldn't even get them to say public option, let alone Medicare for all. And what happened? A socialist is running across the country screaming at the height of his lungs that we can do better than this. We can have a better system than this. They are raping us blind. They are taking your cash. We're paying twice as much as everywhere else in the rest of the world. And why? We're not getting better care for it. Americans aren't using healthcare more for it. They're not using pharmaceuticals more for it. And yet they're being gouged. You're being gouged because of policy reasons. Because people who get put into Congress, who feel your pain language in the Democratic Party, or for that matter in the Republican Party when they're talking to their people, while simultaneously getting paid to screw you over. That's his point. And that point hit home because that point was infinitely true. Even under Obamacare, that left 20, 30 million people without health care. And that's after the push of 8 years. You've tried it all. You've tried letting the private corporate class go about it, and what happened? You got gouged. You tried allowing Obamacare, the Democratic Party, the neoliberal version of healthcare, and what happened? You got gouged. Do you realize in some of those places after Obamacare was passed, healthcare costs was going up by 50%? It was a giveaway to the healthcare industry. Yes, there were improvements into your healthcare. However, you still continue to get gouged. And 8 years after Obamacare was passed, we're still talking about healthcare. Because at the end of the day, a neoliberal who has this utopian version of healthcare where the private corporate class can still maximize their profit at your expense can somehow go in kind with you being able to get affordable healthcare. The Republican comes in, Trump. And even though he told you you were going to have big, beautiful healthcare, what happened? He tried to get rid of your healthcare. He tried to give you Trump care, which was a shittier version of Obamacare. You tried it all. You've plucked every bit of candy, every different piece of candy out of the box. And somebody says, why don't we come up with the novel idea of just doing healthcare for healthcare? That the goal of healthcare is not to maximize somebody else's profit, but the goal of healthcare is to ensure that you get healthcare. So why don't we come up with a system like, Medicare, since, Medicare already exists and has 80% support. And why don't we just expand that to the rest of the country? The overhead is like 2 or 3% compared to the 30% for insurance companies. And for these drug companies trying to maximize their profit. Why don't we just expand Medicare? What a novel, interesting idea. And the public said, we like that. You get into this fight over insurance companies and everything else, but at the end of the day, Medicare for all literally says this is stability. If you change your job, this is stability. When your insurance company or when your employer year after year after year changes insurance companies because they're trying to find the cheapest plan, and there are certain things that your insurance company allows and disallows each year because your insurance company changes, that goes away. This is stability. When you get some major illness and you have to go to the doctor's office over and over and over again, and whereas under Obamacare, under Trump care, under many of the other Democrats' plan who's being pushed, you will get eaten alive by healthcare costs because you're still paying the doctor's visits that you have to go to each and every time. You're still paying for all of these things associated with the hospitals and every random doctor that sees you when you go to the hospital. You're still getting eaten alive. That costs. That goes away. And this notion that you're ripping away healthcare from 150,000 people, you're not ripping away healthcare from those people at all. You're ensuring stability from those people. In the same way that year after year after year, the employer gives them a different healthcare card. Bernie Sanders is going to give them a different healthcare card. And that healthcare card is going to be for in perpetuity. And everything that they would need under the sun for their healthcare costs, with the exception of cosmetic surgeries, is included. And you're not paying at the point of sale, meaning you're not getting eaten alive by those hospital bills. And the top 1% in this country that has been able to run roughshod and make profits that are ungodly start to pay their fair share. Medicare for all is an ideal system of single payer if your goal of healthcare is indeed healthcare. Jamarl, beautiful picture by the way, was doing God's work. Sanders, who's been jumping around the country trying to get people to sign on to this, despite everybody telling him this is radical, this is impossible, this is not something you can do. Why are you talking about Medicare for all? Why are you bringing up this? Why do we spend the Obamacare? Why are you? And yet here we are. Again, it's modest. Trump is in the White House. Republicans have the Senate. But before, and many of these Democrats, if given the opportunity with the neoliberal in office, will not go through with this. You have other places, like in Colorado, if I'm not mistaken, where Democrats finally get in office, House, Senate, governor. And what do? They water down the bills that they were so aggressively passing when they didn't have the ability to affect them. So don't misunderstand me. I'm not blind to this. I will say this, though. At one point, you could barely get Democrats to sign on to the public option. And right now, at this moment, despite having no ability to affect their will, you have 118 members of the Democratic caucus sign on to H.R. 1384, Medicare for All Act of 2019, the real Medicare for All bill. That's astonishing. That's astonishing. A radical proposal. Well, how can it be radical when the majority of Democrats in the House caucus have signed on to it? Jamarl, good job. Bernie Sanders, damn good job. I'll leave it here. This one wasn't meant to be long. It was just kind of give a heads up. David Sirota made note that Medicare for All now has a majority in the House. And again, that requires a Bernie Sanders to keep them on pace for that, but also winning a Senate. But the fact that you got these 118 Democrats who are under normal circumstances absolutely and entirely spineless to sign on to real Medicare for All, put Sanders in the White House. You'll get your Medicare for All. Thanks all. Like and share.